We got company.
Broadsword calling Danny Boy.
You have my sympathies.
We do not follow maps to buried treasure, and X never, ever marks the spot.
I'm glad it's you.
Well, I understand double O's have a very short life expectancy, so your mistake will be short-lived.
Would you like some refreshments?
Oh, I'm fine. Thank
Enjoy the show.
Hi there, welcome to Sitting Through the Credits, a film review podcast covering new releases, cult classics, and everything in between. My name is Matt, and for this 8th episode, I'll be covering the Japanese Kaiju classic, the 1954 film Godzilla. For this review, I will be using the Western ordering practice for Japanese names, rather than the traditional Japanese practice where the family name is followed by the given name. Godzilla was directed by Ishiro Honda, the screenplay co-written between Honda and Takeo Murata from a story by Shigeru Kayama. An allegorical tale tapping into Japanese post-war fears of nuclear war, the story is focused upon the emergence of the titular prehistoric reptile, revived and mutated by hydrogen bomb testing, and the Japanese authorities' attempts to halt this destructive force. The name Godzilla is itself a word translated by its production company, Toho Studios, for distribution purposes overseas, the original Japanese title being Gojira. The accepted origins of the name, endorsed by Toho, are that Tomoyuki Tanaka, the film's producer, named the monster after one of the studio's workers, who had been jokingly nicknamed Gojira. The name was a combination of the Japanese words for gorilla and whale, Gorira and Kujira. Before diving into this review, I have to confess that prior to 2023, I had not seen a Godzilla movie, let alone one of the original Japanese films. It is only thanks to the Criterion Collection that the franchise's Showa era was made available to watch in the UK in 2019. The Showa era, which corresponds with Emperor Showa, the posthumously renamed Emperor Hirohito, was the first Japanese era in which Godzilla films were made. This was followed by the Heisei era and then the current Reiwa era. The Godzilla films, despite being divided into a Heisei and Reiwa era, with a Millennium series in between, does not align perfectly with these periods of Japanese history, however. Other than viewing part of the poorly received 1998 American Godzilla reboot, I hadn't encountered a Godzilla film in my youth. Even today, none of the franchise's Heisei and Millennium era films are available for purchase in the UK. When I first sought out the original film a couple of years ago, in my ignorance I ended up watching the heavily re-edited American cut, Godzilla King of the Monsters from 1956.
Godzilla, King of the Monsters, alive, surging up from the depths of the sea on a tidal wave of terror to wreak vengeance on mankind. Godzilla, King of the Monsters, it's alive! A gigantic beast, stalking the earth, crushing all before it in a cyclonic cavalcade of electrifying horror.
Even though I'm a fan of the film star Raymond Burr, my grandma used to love Ironside, that film pales in comparison with the 1954 original. But how did it all start? Following the failure of Toho Studios' first international co-production and the need to find a replacement, the idea for Godzilla came to Tomoyuki Tanaka after learning of the popularity of giant monster movies in the United States. Chief among these were Ray Harryhausen's 1953 film The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms and the successful third release of the original King Kong in 1952. Tanaka presented his idea to Toho Studios' executive producer Iwao Mori, and it was soon agreed that bringing big spectacles to big screens would be the best way for Toho to compete with the emergence of television. Following the Second World War, the US led a 7-year occupation of Japan, which had a major impact upon the Japanese film industry. Many involved with the production of wartime propaganda films lost their jobs, and media was heavily controlled and censored to prevent any criticism of the US and their allies. Even the production of Japanese films featuring sword fighting was banned for the duration of the occupation. Naturally, this built up a great desire for creative freedom and expression, so when the Treaty of San Francisco came into effect in 1952 and Japan's sovereignty was restored, Japanese film burst forth in what would come to be regarded as the golden age of Japanese cinema. During the US occupation, Iwao Mori had been forced out of Toho Studios because of his involvement with wartime films, and so too had the visionary special effects master Eiji Tsuburaya, arguably the most significant member of the Godzilla production team. Mori and Tsuburaya would both return to Toho after the occupation. However, many of Tsuburaya's films had been buried or burned towards the end of the war in an attempt to avoid any reprisals against him. Joining the project, which was initially titled The Giant Monster from 20,000 Miles Under the Sea, Eiji Tsuburaya was extremely enthusiastic but had no clear idea of what form the monster should take. He and his staff initially prepared a pair of 100cm tall clay models of an octopus. This idea was soon abandoned, when it was realised that this type of creature wouldn't be effective at land-based destruction, and so it was decided that the creature should instead be a dinosaur, a logical choice given their popularity at the time. Work on the film was carried out in secret, simply referred to as Project G for Giant. Instead of hiring a B-movie writer, Toho showed their faith in the project by enlisting the services of the sci-fi and horror novelist Shigeru Kayama. Arranging a meeting with the author, Tomoyuki Tanaka provided the outline of the story, which included the detail that the creature would be revived by a hydrogen bomb. Dealing with such recent traumatic subject matter gave Kayama pause for thought, but his interest would grow, and by the meeting's conclusion, he was fully on board, Tanaka asking Kayama to please take care of everything. Kayama and Tsuburaya worked well together during the writing process, Tsuburaya feeling that the two could talk about the project freely and comfortably. Kayama finished the 50-page manuscript in 2 weeks. He didn't want the story to be commercial and deliberately chose to steer it toward the theme of anti-nuclear protest. This stands in stark contrast to The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, which features atomic weapons but simply as the means by which the Readosaurus is awoken from its Arctic hibernation. The film hit an early snag when the first director chosen to take the helm, Senkichi Taniguchi, immediately turned it down. Fortunately, Tanaka rapidly found a replacement in Ishiro Honda. Having worked at Toho before the war, Honda had survived his military service with the Imperial Japanese Army, had been interred in a prisoner of war camp in China for 6 months, and passed the rubble of Hiroshima as he returned home and back to his work at the studio. Ishiro Honda had worked with Tanaka and Tsuburaya before, and was free to replace Taniguchi, as the project that he had been working on, Shisai Sanshiro, had recently fallen through. Honda agreed to direct the film, but was quietly tentative about the project. That is, until he realised that he could exercise some of his own demons by making a film that commented on Japan's recent wartime and post-war experiences. In his words, what appealed to him the most was the idea of making radiation visual. Godzilla would be Honda's 5th full-length feature film of his 46-film career. Takeo Murata, a respected screenwriter and senior assistant director, who was credited as the film's co-writer, wrote the first full draft of Godzilla's script. Occasional input was made by Tsuburaya, Tanaka and Kayama, with Ishiro Honda contributing additional dialogue and his own ideas to the script. It was Honda who suggested that the creature should be a mutation of several species, fused into one being by the hydrogen bomb. In Murata's script, Godzilla breathed fire, but Honda had this detail altered to a deadly radioactive ray. With such an effects-driven film, storyboarding was key to communicating the vision to the studio staff. Around 200 charcoal illustrations were produced by fine art students for this purpose, the storyboards then being mounted on the walls of a sealed-off section of Toho Studios' cafeteria. The film's production was shrouded in absolute secrecy. There were no open sets, no unauthorised visitors, no interviews, no photographs of the monster or miniatures, and no behind-the-scenes footage released before the film was ready to be viewed by the public. For these reasons, Tsuburaya's special effects sequences were filmed in secrecy between 9 PM and dawn. Following the picture's preliminary design work, which commenced in June, the production was announced to the press on July 5, 1954. The filming of Godzilla would commence in August. Honda's first choice for his cast was a very familiar face. Takashi Shimura, who plays Dr. Kyohei Yamane, had already appeared in Honda's first 3 films.
ゴジラを殺すことばかり考えて、なぜ物理衛生学の立場から研究しようとしないんだ。このまたとない機会を。
A fine character actor, Shimura is probably best known for playing the role of Kanbei, the heroic leader of the Seven Samurai, and for playing the terminally ill Kanji Watanabe in another Kurosawa film, Ikiru. His presence in Godzilla certainly added dramatic weight to the film, increasing its credibility. Akihiko Hirata memorably played the role of the facially scarred scientist, Dr. Daisuke Serizawa. Serizawa is the most fascinating character in the film, Hirata communicating his tortured genius and loneliness brilliantly on screen.
尾形、恵美子さんから僕の秘密を聞いたんなら、僕があれを使わない理由が分かったはずだ。僕がはっきりことは、芹田さん、ダメだ。こんなにお願いしてもダメですか。帰ってくれたまえ。芹田さん。
Hirata would become a familiar face in the Godzilla franchise, appearing 6 further times in heroic and villainous roles. He would also appear in many of Toho's projects without Godzilla, including Rodan, the H-Man, Mothra, and Atragon, to name a few. Akira Takarada played Hideto Ogata, a sailor working for Japan's Maritime Safety Agency and the love interest of Emiko.
恵美子さん、すまん。
何か事故でも？
本社の船から SOS が入ったんだ。すぐ海上保安庁に行かなくちゃならないんだ。
Another familiar face, Takarada would be one of only 3 actors to appear in Godzilla's first 3 film eras. Momoko Kochi plays Emiko Yamane, the Doctor's daughter, whose relationship struggles form a major subplot of the film. Her love for Ogata and desire to control her own destiny is obstructed by an arranged engagement to Dr. Serizawa. The rapport between Kochi and Shimura in the film is clear to see, and was a case of life imitating art. Shimura had taken the inexperienced Kochi under his wing, and this clearly contributed to their believable performances as father and daughter.
お父様。
しばらく一人にしといてくれ。恵美子、電気を消してってくれ。
はい。
Despite initially being embarrassed by her work on the film, over a lunch shortly after the film's release, Akira Takarada assured her that the film would be a box office hit and a blessing to both of their careers. As a result of this, she would soon accept her nickname, the Godzilla Princess, with pride. Kochi would return to the role of Emiko 41 years later for the 22nd Godzilla film, Godzilla vs. Destroyer, in one of her final acting roles. Another, less prominent actor who can be spotted in this film, who would soon become very familiar in the world of Godzilla, is Kenji Sahara. Sahara can be spotted in 2 roles in the first film, playing both a newspaper reporter and a cruise ship passenger. He would make appearances in 12 further Godzilla films, narrowly giving him the record for the most appearances in the franchise. But of course, the film's biggest star is the King of the Monsters himself. The initial design for Godzilla was first sketched by the manga illustrator Wasuke Abe. The fictional dinosaur design that was decided upon was a combination of the shape of a Tyrannosaurus Rex with the posture, tail and arms of an iguanodon and the armoured backplates of a Stegosaurus. Sculptor Teizo Toshimitsu was commissioned to create 3 40cm tall clay maquettes of the monster, from the full body designs created by art director Akira Watanabe, each with different finishes for its skin. The design that was eventually chosen had linear grooves, which were intended to represent radiation scarring. Stop motion was briefly considered as a way of realising the creature, but given Aiji Tsuburai's expertise in the field, the team decided that filming with a performer in a suit alongside detailed miniatures was the best way to bring the monster to life. Given his work sculpting the prototypes, Toshimitsu was put in charge of constructing the Godzilla suit. The first suit, known as the Shodai Goji, or first generation Gojira, was built by Toshimitsu and the 2 brothers, Kanju and Yasue Yagi, with help from miniature model maker Eizo Kaimai. A framework was built from bamboo and chicken wire, which was then covered with cloth before melted latex was poured onto it and a latex skin with additional etched details added. Godzilla's head, hands and feet were sculpted and then cast using liquid latex. Its tail was also sculpted, and its eyes were made of wood sprayed with silver lacquer and then coloured. Once the suit had taken shape, it was covered in charcoal grey acrylic paint, followed by several coats of lacquer. Entry to the costume was afforded by an opening on the creature's back dorsal fin section, which could be opened and closed. The suit actors could see through the suit's neck section, and Godzilla's mouth could be opened by technicians nearby using a cable-operated system attached to a pair of bicycle handles. The completed creature suit stood 2 meters tall. Upon seeing the design, the studio executives asked if Tsuburaya could tone down its menacing appearance, but fortunately, his vision for the monster remained. Although the word kaiju, meaning strange beast, already existed in Japanese literature and folklore, Godzilla is regarded as the first film of this science fiction subgenre. As well as being credited as one of the fathers of kaiju movies, alongside Ishiro Honda, Eiji Tsuburaya coined the term tokusatsu for Japanese special effects-led films. The film's unsung heroes, who deserve the most credit for their contributions, are the 2 actors who were first to don the Godzilla costume for the suitmation technique. Although it remains undocumented exactly which of the 2 performers was in each specific scene, it is accepted that the bulk of Godzilla's performance in the original film was given by Haruo Nakajima. During World War II, Nakajima served in the Imperial Japanese Navy, where he cheated death on several occasions. After a period of unemployment and driving trucks, he eventually stepped into the world of acting, appearing as an extra in numerous roles, including one as a bandit slain in Akira Kurosawa's Seven Samurai. Nakajima was Honda's first choice to play Godzilla, the actor having performed an impressive fire stunt for him in his film Eagle of the Pacific. As the role was an effects role, Nakajima had to get the go-ahead from Eiji Tsuburaya and then the Actors Board. Although Tsuburaya was satisfied with Honda's recommendation, a complication then arose when the section chief of the effects department, Katsumi Tezuka, insisted that he should play the role. Eventually, a compromise was reached, with Tezuka and Nakajima sharing duties in the suit. The first suit test was used to decide who would do the majority of the creature work, a test which proved difficult for both men because of the extreme heat inside the suit, and the fact that the weight made it difficult to move. Both actors collapsed during the test, but Nakajima had managed to walk 10 meters, whilst Tezuka had only managed 3. Given the difficulties exposed during the test, a second Godzilla suit was constructed, this time of a lighter latex to bring its total weight down to 60 kilograms. The first version of the suit was still of use, however, being cut into segments so that the upper half could be used for sequences at sea and the lower half could be used for walking destruction sequences, where the upper body didn't need to be visible. Nakajima was a licensed scuba diver, which would be of great value for the scenes where Godzilla had to emerge from the waters of Tokyo Bay. He would be submerged inside the top section of the first suit with a scuba tank. The water filming proved to be the film's most hazardous, Nakajima almost drowning on one occasion when he lost his air hose. More seriously, Tezuka was electrocuted in the water tank by wires designed to detonate explosive charges affixed to the suit. Once carried from the water, it was found his heart had stopped, but fortunately he was resuscitated in time. The suit's internal temperature would rise to 54 degrees Celsius when shooting under studio lights, so Nakajima was generally limited to 3-minute spells. After that time, he would pass out and have to be caught by waiting technicians. Other than the segmented first suit, there was no backup. Once shooting had wrapped, the Yagi brothers would return the suit to their workshop, dry it out and patch it ready for the next evening's shooting. Given the conditions they had to endure, it has to be said that labelling any of Godzilla's performers as simple stuntmen is doing them a tremendous disservice. At the time of the original release, both Nakajima and Tezuka would go uncredited for their work as suit actors, however both were given speaking roles to ensure their place in the film's opening credits. Both can be spotted in a brief scene in a newspaper office soon after the scene where Godzilla menaces a cruise ship. Nakajima is the journalist with a pencil tucked behind his ear, and Tezuka is the editor who enters the frame from the left to give the journalist Hagiwara his assignment. Nakajima also plays an engineer at the electrical power station. Despite the difficulties he encountered and injuries he sustained whilst filming the first Godzilla film, Katsumi Tezuka would continue to work as a suit actor. He would play Godzilla's first rival kaiju, Anguirus, in the sequel Godzilla Raids Again, and would share the Godzilla role with Nakajima on 3 further occasions. Haruo Nakajima would continue to play Godzilla until his 1972 performance in Godzilla vs. Gigan, his 12th consecutive time playing the role. Always proud of his involvement with the franchise and a lifelong supporter of it, even once retired from the role, he was well known for his good humour and passion for the fans. Haruo Nakajima passed away in 2017 at the age of 88. He was, and forever will be, Godzilla. The film's production commenced in August 1954 and utilised 3 filming units. Unit A was focused on live action filming with the main cast, both on location and in studio. Unit B was dedicated to Eiji Tsuburaya's work, focused on the Godzilla costume, the miniatures, and the practical effects shots. Finally, Unit C was focused on animation and optical effects. Because of the scale of the production, space from 5 additional studios had to be rented in and around Tokyo. An efficient director who never lost sight of the overall picture of the production, Ishiro Honda's directing style championed communication with his cast and crew. He was well known for promoting a friendly, harmonious atmosphere on set. Even when he received second-degree burns from the location filming, which scarred him for life, this only increased his resolve. An infamous incident took place whilst location scouting, the team being investigated after they were overheard discussing where fires would take place, where crowds would be killed, and where a police car would be blown up. The fictional Odo Island was shot around the city of Toba, to the north of the Shima Peninsula in Japan's Mie prefecture. Although real footage of divers was shot on location for the film's finale, insert shots of Serizawa and Ogata were filmed in studio, with a water tank set up between them and the camera. For the depth charge sequence, footage was used of a World War II Japanese depth charge training mission. Further 16mm stock footage was acquired to depict the arriving aircraft of experts from abroad. Some limited cooperation existed between the production and the Japanese Self-Defense Force, the JSDF, who are seen opposing Godzilla armed with US weaponry. Because Honda was striving for authenticity, however, he commandeered a second unit which was filming a convoy of real JSDF vehicles being transferred between military bases. Under his supervision, the camera crew would set up ahead of the convoy, film them as they passed, then load everything into their cars, overtake them, set up their equipment and film them again, multiple times. Similarly, Honda was dissatisfied with the blank-firing weapons that were being used for the production, and so instead recorded real machine guns firing live ammunition at a base outside Tokyo. Clearly, the special effects are the star of the film, with 23 minutes of Godzilla's 96-minute runtime being composed of effects shots. The special effects filming alone consisted of 850 separate shots, all of which were personally edited by Eiji Tsuburaya. Most of the film's effects work was filmed on Toho's Sound Studios 8 and 9, with several large outdoor water tanks used, their waves generated by electric fans. The film sequences depicting the destruction of Tokyo are a showcase from Eiji Tsuburaya, illustrating just what Japanese special effects teams were capable of. The 2-metre Godzilla suit was intended to depict a creature standing 50 metres tall, so the miniatures constructed for the film were built at a scale of 1:25. Under the supervision of art director Akira Watanabe, Tsuburaya's team produced approximately 500 buildings, 20 boats, 12 jet fighters, 10 tanks, 10 howitzers, and 10 towers, as well as numerous additional cars and vehicles. Tokyo Building Standards law limited buildings to a height of 30 metres, so a 50-metre tall creature would be able to tower above the city's skyline. The art department made multiple trips to the districts depicted in miniature in order to best replicate the structures located there. At one point, Tsuburaya famously ordered the entire miniature set of the Ginza district to be demolished and rebuilt, presumably because he didn't think the level of detail was high enough. The miniature buildings were built directly on the stage and included internal walls and floors to ensure that those marked for destruction would crumble realistically. Another technique which was employed was high-speed photography, which ensured that the destruction caused by the creature seemed more authentic when it was played back at normal speed. Debris would also be blasted upward as the creature moved, using compressed air. A number of key Tokyo landmarks can be seen being destroyed during Godzilla's rampage, including the Toho-owned Nichigeki Theatre, the National Diet Building, and the Kachidoki Bridge. The film's miniature military vehicles and artillery pieces were fashioned from iron, so that their weight would counteract the recoil when they were shown to be firing on Godzilla. The tanks, based on the live-action footage shot of M24 Chaffees, were moved by wires, by stop motion, or were pushed into shot from off-screen. The film's miniature fire engines were also made of cast iron and featured rubber tyres and hoses. For the sequence where Godzilla is attacked by missiles from F-86 Sabre jet fighters, a large-scale forward section of a Sabre was built along with a puppet pilot. The aircraft's wire-guided missiles were then electrically ignited before being released towards their target. A hand-operated puppet of Godzilla, referred to as a guignol, would be operated by Fumio Nakadai and Shoji Ogawa. This puppet would utilise a number of different heads, some being fitted with sprays for use in the atomic breath scenes. In order to emphasise the monster's size, generally only portions of it were shown, leaving the audience with the impression that it was too big to fit within the frame. Dark photography was employed to make Godzilla's fiery, destructive rampage more dramatic and atmospheric, whilst also helping to conceal any imperfections with the suit and the miniatures. The atomic breath scene, with the melting of high-tension towers, was achieved by replacing the handmade metal miniatures with ones made of wax, which could then be melted by the crew and beneath the studio lights. Some of the film's best effects are so seamless that they're easy to overlook. Godzilla employs a number of glass matte shots, which were combined with live-action footage for sequences such as the destroyed village on Odo Island and Godzilla's footprints on the beach. The principal photography for the film was concluded after 122 days. With the popularity of monster movies still an unknown quantity in Japan, Toho decided to broadcast a live radio play of the story titled Daikaiju Gojira, or The Monster Godzilla. 11 30-minute episodes were transmitted on the Nippon Broadcasting System between July and September 1954, using their own music and sound effects as these were yet to be finalised for the film. This radio drama, featuring additional expository scenes that were not present in the film, would then form the basis for the novelisation, which was released shortly before the film hit theatres. Composite still photographs of Godzilla were also produced by Issei Tanaka for marketing purposes. It is testament to the work of Godzilla's composer Akira Ifukube that the theme for Godzilla is still being used 70 years later. Indeed, of the over 200 films that he would score over his career, he considered his score for Godzilla to be one of his finest accomplishments. Ifukube's contemporaries had warned him that working on a film like Godzilla would hurt his career. He was fascinated by the subject matter, however. His brother had died from radiation exposure, and he himself suffered from wartime exposure to X-rays. Ifukube only commenced work on the film's score once the footage was made available to him, which is why the film's theatrical trailer was released with more generic stock music. Eiji Tsuburaya was incredibly secretive when it came to his effects work and refused to show the film's rushes to almost everyone. This could have been an obstacle to the scoring process. However, unbeknownst to Ifukube, when they were introduced, the two had previously met. When Tsuburaya had been ostracised from the Japanese film industry during the US occupation, he was known to spend time alone in the corner of a restaurant that was frequented by Ifukube. Taking pity on the down-on-his-luck loner, Ifukube would occasionally buy him drinks. Gratefully remembering his kindness, the composer was one of the few with whom Tsuburaya would share his work, and the two developed a good relationship. A number of the sound effects, including Godzilla's roar, were created musically by Ifukube and his team. For the roar, the strings were loosened on a contrabass, but left attached to its tailpiece. A leather glove was then coated with resin before one of Ifukube's pupils rubbed the glove along the strings. This would create a rough buzzing sound that would become higher pitched if it was pulled quickly. Once tape recorded, it could be played back at various slower speeds and with an echo chamber to achieve Godzilla's different roars. The inspiration for the creature's footsteps sound effect was somewhat less technical. Whilst conducting, Ifukube had accidentally knocked over a box which had a spring installed within it for use as a primitive amplifier. The composer was given a week to write the music, and on October 21st, he conducted the 24-piece NHK Philharmonic Orchestra. The entire score for Godzilla was recorded in a day. A surprisingly small amount of music was scored for the film, totaling approximately 40 minutes, less than half of the movie's runtime. Ifukube would be the perfect choice to score a film with a powerful anti-nuclear sentiment, having scored Hideo Sekigawa's powerful 1953 film Hiroshima. Indeed, the music that runs throughout that film, but which is most poignant in the aftermath of the detonation of the atomic bomb, is almost identical to the emotional Godzilla Under the Sea track that he would write a year later. A major reason for Godzilla's success, when compared to its contemporaries, is its richness in themes. The picture is one of the first anti-nuclear films, a metaphor for the contemporary fears in Japan of the ongoing nuclear weapons testing at Japanese locations, including Bikini Atoll. Additionally, had Japan not surrendered after the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, Tokyo had been designated as the next atomic bomb target. As well as illustrating the devastation of a nuclear weapon, the imagery of a burning Tokyo also served to conjure up the recent Japanese memories of the firebombings they were subjected to by the US Air Force. Operation Meeting House on the 10th of March 1945 had employed napalm in the single most destructive bombing raid ever recorded, making over 1 million residents of Tokyo homeless and claiming the lives of an estimated 100,000 to 130,000 Japanese civilians. The sinking of the film's fishing vessels, Aiko Maru and Bingo Maru, are clearly inspired by the incident involving the ship Daigo Fukuyu Maru, the Lucky Dragon No. 5. The Lucky Dragon No. 5 was crewed by 23 men, all of whom were contaminated by radioactive fallout. The vessel had sailed into radioactive ash clouds distributed by the US Castle Bravo thermonuclear device detonated on the Bikini Atoll on the 1st of March 1954. The Castle Bravo weapon test, a test approximately 2.5 times more powerful than anticipated, would cause the first international nuclear incident, as well as the tuna panic. Vast quantities of caught, irradiated fish were disposed of, and restrictions placed on their sale and export, doing untold damage to Japan's fishing industry. Although it is heavily implied that Godzilla was awoken by US hydrogen bomb testing, the film stops short of explicitly referencing America. In Shigeru Kayama's novel, he states that a foreign expert is from the country of A, as it is common in Japanese literature to just use a capital letter when the author doesn't want to be specific. It was prescient of Toho to not be explicit in their criticism of the United States and their nuclear testing. The anti-American stance of Sekigawa's powerful Hiroshima docudrama contributed to its limited release, and it is a film that has sadly fallen into obscurity for many years. In contrast, the allegorical story of Godzilla can be interpreted in a variety of ways. The creature can be seen as a victim of US technology, as a representation of the US itself, or even as a punishment for modern Japan's abandonment of its traditional heritage. Whatever interpretation you take, Godzilla is certainly more than just a creature feature. Its metaphorical nature allowing it and the subsequent franchise it would spawn to stand the test of time and reach a broader international audience. Much of the film has the feeling of a documentary. Many of its shots depicting the panicking population could easily be mistaken for stock footage of wartime Japan, particularly because of its street-level perspective. Rather than focus on spectacle, Ishiro Honda chose to emphasize human tragedy. One of the film's most heart-wrenching scenes shows a mother clutching her 3 children close and reassuring them that they'll be with their daddy soon, knowing that their deaths are imminent. Similarly, an early scene shows a group of people behaving in a nonchalant manner at the prospect of another threat heading for Japan. For them, retreating to air raid shelters is still a recent memory, so the prospect of doing so again sees a tragic return to normality. As well as having a memorable antagonist, the human characters in Godzilla all make strong contributions to the story. There is conflict as they debate the best way to deal with the threat posed by Godzilla. Dr. Yamane wanting to study the creature, without seeing it come to harm, whilst the headstrong Ogata agrees with the military response, believing action is necessary to halt Godzilla's rampage. Serving as the story's MacGuffin, a key object for the resolution of the plot, the introduction of Dr. Serizawa's oxygen destroyer allows the film to further explore its anti-nuclear themes. Although not a nuclear weapon, Serizawa has still inadvertently stumbled upon a weapon of mass destruction, and is therefore cast as a Japanese parallel to scientists like J. Robert Oppenheimer. Up until this point, we have seen the positive side of science, Dr. Yamane leading the way, whilst the military response has been ineffective at halting Godzilla. Serizawa and Ogata's struggle over the oxygen destroyer is more than just an ethical dilemma, though. It also represents their personal conflict for Emiko's affections and the battle between traditional Japan and modern Japan. Already we have seen the latter conflict with the stark contrast between the spirituality of the Odo Islanders with their beliefs and Shinto rituals, and the military and scientific response to Godzilla in Tokyo. Ultimately, Serizawa is swayed by the television broadcast of The Prayer for Peace, one of Akira Ifukube's standout musical pieces. For all of its incredible effects, this emotional scene is one of Godzilla's highlights. The prayer, sung by a choir of 200 female students from the Toho Gakuen School of Music. Swayed by the choir, Serizawa finally agrees to deploy his oxygen destroyer, but destroys its plans so that others cannot follow his research. And now, a spoiler warning for the conclusion of this classic film. All of the film's main characters head out to sea for the film's finale. Serizawa dives into the depths of Tokyo Bay to face Godzilla and deploy the oxygen destroyer, Ogata, an experienced diver, insisting he accompany him. One might expect this final face-off to be scored with bombastic or dread-filled music, but instead Ifukube's score is full of sadness, foreshadowing the imminent sacrifice that lies ahead. Even when Godzilla appears in his natural habitat, it is no longer a creature of unbridled destruction, but appears to approach the two divers with curiosity. Ogata ascends to the surface and pleads with Serizawa to follow him, but Serizawa remains and activates the oxygen destroyer. Dr. Serizawa's suicide is depicted as an atonement for his sin and the sins of all scientists who have created a weapon of mass destruction. He rejects the possible future where he will be the next Oppenheimer and gives his life to prevent Godzilla wreaking havoc on a present day that he himself no longer wishes to live in. By cutting his air hose, he also chooses to suffocate, as Godzilla does, the two sharing the same fate. Their passing is emblematic of old ways being abandoned, Godzilla a prehistoric creature out of time, and Serizawa associated with traditional concepts like arranged marriage and suicide to achieve a noble death. Serizawa's goodbye, wishing Emiko and Ogata happiness, suggests that he had long known about their relationship and was just as trapped by the arranged marriage as they were. After a final attempt to reach the surface, Godzilla is slain and begins to disintegrate. The skeleton of the monster was a prop built from rubber applied to a wire frame, which was created by Teizo Toshimitsu. The silent tribute to Serizawa from the sailors and journalists, Emiko's tears, Ogata's realisation, and Dr. Yamane's grief-filled monologue brings the story to a close with appropriately dramatic weight.
もし水爆実験が続けて行われるとしたら、ゴジラの同類がまた世界のどこかへ現れてくるかもしれない。
His words warn that another Godzilla may emerge should humanity continue to strive for more methods of nuclear destruction. Despite this bleak victory, Ishiro Honda still chooses to end the film on a hopeful image, the camera looking out to the horizon at a brighter future. Upon the film's release, 2-hour queues to watch the movie were not unusual, and it set the record for the highest opening day attendance for a Japanese film at that time. Godzilla would be the 8th most profitable Japanese film of 1954, a film seen by around 9.7 million people during its initial theatrical run. It grossed 152 million yen on a budget of approximately 64 million, minus promotional costs. This budget was approximately 4 times the budget of the average Japanese movie at the time, but the box office proved that the investment had been worthwhile. With Japanese science fiction still in its infancy, reviews were mixed at the time, the film drawing some criticism for attempting to profit from the Lucky Dragon incident and the widespread devastation Japan had suffered in the Second World War. Abroad, however, the film received critical acclaim, the film going on to be considered a classic and one of the greatest monster movies of all time. Ishiro Honda would not return to direct the Rush sequel that would follow in 1955, Godzilla Raids Again, Motoyoshi Oda taking the helm instead. Despite the return of Dr. Yamane, who arrives bearing footage from the original movie, this film largely ignores the sombre anti-nuclear and anti-war themes of the original. The sequel, with a second Godzilla, did set the series in a new direction, however, being the first of many films where Godzilla battles another kaiju, in this case the giant ankylosaurus, Anguirus. Honda would return to the franchise to direct 7 more Godzilla films in a long and varied career which would see him become one of Japan's most internationally successful filmmakers. The more serious Godzilla films, where Godzilla himself is the main threat, tend to be my personal favourites, such as Godzilla Returns, Shin Godzilla, and Godzilla -1, primarily because these films tend to be darker and explore deeper themes. With that being said, I love watching a good monster brawl, so even when Godzilla is at its most flamboyant and theatrical, such as in Godzilla vs. Megalon, I still have a lot of fun watching it. As you can probably tell, for me the original Godzilla is a 10 out of 10 movie, as well as being my favourite film from the Godzilla franchise. Is it an absolutely perfect film? Even the film's biggest champions struggle to justify Dr. Yamane's glaringly inaccurate claim that dinosaurs roamed the Earth 2 million years ago. Certainly, Eiji Tsuburaya would go on to further refine his effects work. Akira Ifukube would continue to build on his wonderful score, and it has to be said that the Godzilla guignol in this film is nowhere near as convincing as the full-sized suit. But, viewed in the context of its time, what the team of talented artists and performers at Toho Studios produced in 1954 was nothing short of a masterpiece. I'm writing and recording these words in 2024, Godzilla's 70th anniversary year. For a creature who has been both hero and villain, danced on Jupiter, learned to fly, has his own star on the Hollywood Walk of Fame, and holds the Guinness World Record for the longest film franchise in history, it is always important to remember the origin of the King of the Monsters. Last year's Godzilla -1 very clearly paid tribute to the original film, and then went even further when a black and white cut was released, Godzilla -1 minus colour. That film was my favourite of 2023, so expect to hear me review it later on this year. Hopefully you enjoyed this 8th episode of Sitting Through the Credits. Apologies if I've made any errors with my pronunciation of Japanese names and words in this episode. If you'd like to stay up to date with my current podcast projects, you can find the links to my socials in the description below. I'm looking forward to bringing more film reviews to you in the near future. Thank you for listening. Arigato gozaimasu.
I'm gonna hide this tape when I'm finished.
Replicants are like any other machine. They're either a benefit or a hazard.
Erasing it. It's life.
What's the boogeyman?
Any further resistance will be dealt with in the same way.
As a matter of fact, it was.
End of story.